The moment Marcus Hale saw the boy's jacket, something inside him went very still. It wasn't the jacket itself, a thin gray thing, clearly a size too large, with a broken zipper held shut by a safety pin. It was the patch sewn onto the left sleeve, a small embroidered lighthouse, white thread on navy blue. His wife had that same lighthouse on a scarf she'd worn every single winter until the February she didn't come home. Marcus hadn't moved from his chair by the window of Harborview Cafe. He'd been sitting there for 40 minutes, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold, waiting for his accountant, not looking at anyone in particular. But he was looking now. The boy was maybe 10, 11 at most, dark-haired, slight, with the kind of careful posture children develop when they've learned not to take up too much space. He stood just inside the door of the cafe, dripping from the November rain, clutching a paper bag that was already going translucent with wet. He wasn't looking at the menu above the counter. He was looking at the gap between the counter and the wall, calculating something. The woman at the counter, young, kind-faced, leaned forward. "Can I help you, sweetheart? I'm just waiting for the rain to stop," the boy said. His voice was steady, practiced. "You can sit anywhere you like. I'm okay here." Marcus watched the boy's eyes track to the pastry case, just for a second. Then they snapped back to the door. He picked up his coffee, crossed the room, and crouched down to the boy's eye level in a way that probably looked strange to everyone else in the cafe and that he did not care about at all. "What's in the bag?" Marcus asked. The boy blinked at him. "Groceries. Heavy. Not really. Sit down with me for a minute. I'll buy you something hot." The boy studied him the way children study adults they've been taught not to trust, taking stock. Marcus held still under the assessment and waited. "I don't take things from strangers," the boy said finally. "That's a good rule. My name is Marcus Hale. I live on Dunleavy Street. I own a shipping logistics company called Northgate Maritime, and I've been coming to this cafe every Thursday for 9 years. Ask anyone here." He gestured vaguely at the counter. "Now you know my name and my Thursday habits. Less of a stranger." Something shifted in the boy's expression. Not trust exactly, more like curiosity overcoming caution. "Theo," the boy said. "Theo." Marcus straightened up. "Come sit down, Theo. The rain's not stopping for a while and you're dripping on the floor." They sat by the window. Marcus ordered a hot chocolate and a ham and cheese croissant without asking, because the boy had looked at the pastry case again when he thought no one was watching, and when it arrived Theo ate with the focused attention of someone who hadn't eaten since morning. Marcus didn't ask questions while he ate. He looked out the window at the rain coming off the harbor and thought about the lighthouse patch and tried not to think about it too hard. When Theo had finished and wrapped both hands around the hot chocolate mug, Marcus nodded at the patch on his sleeve. "Where'd you get that jacket?" Theo looked down at his arm. "It was my mom's. She cut the sleeve off one of her old shirts and sewed it on the lighthouse. She likes lighthouses." He paused. She likes them." The correction hit Marcus somewhere between the sternum and the throat. "Is your mom okay, Theo?" The boy looked at the window. Outside, a streetcar hissed past through the standing water on King Street. "She's sick," he said. "She's been sick for a while. I'm sorry." Theo shrugged in the way children shrug when they've been told sorry too many times, and it stopped meaning anything. "She works when she can. We're okay." Marcus looked at the thin jacket and the paper bag of groceries and the safety pin holding the zipper shut and said nothing. "She used to have a studio," Theo said, unprompted, like the words had been waiting for the right silence. "She's an artist, watercolors mostly. She had a studio on Bathurst Street before she got sick, and then we couldn't keep it, but she still paints. She sells things online sometimes." He wrapped his hands tighter around the mug. "She painted a lighthouse last week. Took her 4 hours because she has to stop and rest a lot, but it was really good. Someone bought it the next day. She sounds talented." "She is." The word came out fierce, defensive. Marcus looked at the patch again, a white lighthouse on navy blue, the kind of image that came from somewhere specific, from a memory. "Does she ever talk about where she's from? Before Toronto?" Theo frowned. "She grew up near Nova Scotia. A little town. She doesn't talk about it much." He picked at the edge of his mug. "She doesn't really talk about before. She says some chapters are better left closed. Some chapters are better left closed." Marcus felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the cafe temperature. His wife, Nora, used to say something similar. She'd said it about her childhood, about the years before they met, about a whole geography of herself she'd kept folded away. He'd loved her for it and been frustrated by it in equal measure. He'd thought he had decades to unfold it slowly. He'd had 11 years. "Theo," he said carefully. "Your mom, what's her name?" "Eleanor." The boy looked up. "Why?" Marcus's heart did something complicated. Eleanor was not Nora's name. He exhaled slowly, told himself to stop, told himself he did this. He found pieces that fit and assembled them into a shape he wanted, and it was never what he thought it was. "No reason," he said, "just being polite." Theo accepted this. He reached into his paper bag and rearranged something inside, then looked up with an expression that was trying very hard to be casual. "Do you know anything about hospitals? Like, what kind of doctor would someone see for something that makes them tired all the time and their hands shake?" The question landed with the weight of something that had taken a long time to ask. Marcus leaned forward. "What do her doctors say? We don't really have a regular doctor right now. She goes to the walk-in sometimes, but she says it costs too much to get all the tests done." He kept his voice even. "How long has she been like this? About a year? Maybe longer?" Theo looked out the window. "She tries not to let me see when it's bad. But I see anyway." Marcus Hale had made his first million at 32, and his fifth at 38. And he had sat across the table from prime ministers and union heads and people who wanted things from him, and he could not remember the last time a conversation had made him feel so completely leveled. There was something about this boy, the careful posture, the watchful eyes, the particular texture of his self-sufficiency, that reminded him, painfully and precisely, of trying to hold something together that you were too young to be holding. "Can I ask you something strange?" Marcus said. Theo looked at him. "Okay, that jacket, the lighthouse patch. Did your mom ever say where the image came from? Like, whether it was a specific lighthouse?" Theo thought about it. "She said it was from painting she did a long time ago, before I was born. She said it was the view from somewhere she lived for a little while, and that it was the most peaceful thing she'd ever seen." He paused. "She said she painted the same lighthouse so many times she could do it, with her eyes closed." Marcus's chest had gone very tight. There was a lighthouse outside the window of the apartment where he and Nora had spent the first summer of their marriage. A rental on Cape Breton Island, 2 weeks in July, so early in their life together that everything still had the quality of something slightly unreal. They'd been poor then in the way that young people can afford to be poor, happy with a leaking roof and a second-hand mattress and the lighthouse blinking across the water every night. Nora had painted it 6 times. 7. She'd given the paintings away to strangers, she said, because she wanted other people to feel what it felt like to look at something that just kept showing up in the dark. "Theo," Marcus said. His voice came out different than he intended. "Quieter. What's your last name?" The boy hesitated. Then, "Calloway. My mom's name is Eleanor Calloway." Calloway was her mother's maiden name, Nora's. He had never known her to use it except once, after a fight, when she'd signed a note as Eleanor Nora Calloway and slid it under the bathroom door as a peace offering, and he'd laughed for 5 minutes. The room felt like it was rearranging itself. He kept his hands flat on the table and breathed. In, out. "How old are you, Theo?" 11. 11 years old. Nora had been gone for 12 years. She'd vanished in February, on a Tuesday, on a day so ordinary he hadn't registered it as the last one until it was already over. She'd gone to get groceries and she hadn't come back. The police had found her car at the base of a ravine, on a road she had no reason to be on. The water had been very high. They had recovered certain things. They had not recovered her. He had buried an empty casket. He had told himself it was closure. He had not had a single day of closure in 12 years. 11 years old. "Theo," he said, "does your mom have a scar on her left wrist?" "About 3 inches long." The boy went completely still. "How do you know that?" he whispered. Marcus could not speak for a moment. He looked at this boy, this 11-year-old boy with his mother's careful eyes, and his mother's careful posture and a lighthouse sewn onto sleeve, and felt 12 years of grief do something he did not have a word for. Not dissolve, crack open. "The scar," Marcus finally said. "I know where it came from." She was 26. She was trying to fix a broken window in our old apartment and the glass slipped. Theo stood up. His chair scraped back. He was gripping the edge of the table. "Our apartment, I think," Marcus said, and he could hear how careful he was being, how carefully he was placing each word down like something that might shatter. I think your mother might be someone I knew a very long time ago, and I think she might not have known she was leaving someone behind. She didn't leave anyone, Theo said, sharp and immediate. She's not that kind of person. I know, Marcus said. That's why I've never understood it. The boy stared at him. Outside, the rain kept falling and the streetcar hissed past, again going the other direction, and the cafe hummed around them in ordinary November afternoon ways. What's your wife's name? Theo asked. Nora. Her name was Nora Hale. Before that, Eleanor Nora Calloway. The color left Theo's face so completely that Marcus half stood up in case he needed to catch him. That's my mom's full name, Theo said very quietly. Nobody calls her Eleanor, she's always just Nora. His voice broke on the last syllable and then reassembled itself. But she never told me she was married. Marcus sat back down. He pressed his hands flat on the table because he needed something solid she wouldn't have. She didn't know. He stopped. Started again. Theo, I need you to understand something. Your mother disappeared 12 years ago. There was an accident. The police, her family, everyone. We all thought she was dead. I thought she was dead. I spent 12 years thinking she was dead. Theo sat back down slowly. His hot chocolate had gone cold. He looked at it. She never told me about an accident, he said. She just said there were things she'd left behind that she couldn't go back to. Did she ever say why? A long silence. The boy was working through something, and Marcus gave him room to work. She had nightmares when I was little, Theo said finally. I used to hear her through the wall. They got better when I was about 7. But before that, he stopped. There was a man, I don't know his name. She's never said his name. But I know she was afraid of him. There were times she'd see someone on the street and she'd put her hand on my shoulder and steer me the other direction really fast without explaining. He looked up at Marcus. She wasn't running away from a life. She was running away from someone in that life. Marcus felt something cold and specific settle over him. He had known, in the way you know things you don't want to know, that there had been something wrong in the months before Nora disappeared. A tension in her that she wouldn't name, a habit she'd developed of checking over her shoulder. He had asked. She'd told him he was imagining things. He had let himself be told. He had spent 12 years wondering if it was his fault. Theo, he said, do you think your mom would talk to me? Theo looked at him for a very long time. He had his mother's eyes. Marcus could see that now with a clarity that was almost painful, a gray-green that shifted depending on the light. I don't know, Theo said honestly. I think she'd be scared, and I think she'd be, he searched for the word, ashamed. Even though she shouldn't be, she has nothing to be ashamed of. I know that. But she doesn't. Marcus nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a business card, plain white, just his name and number, and slid it across the table. I'm not going to show up at your door, he said. I'm not going to make any demands. I just want you to give her this and tell her that a man at a cafe recognized her lighthouse and that he's been waiting a long time, and that whatever she was afraid of, he can help. He paused. Can you do that? Theo looked at the card. He picked it up with 2 fingers and turned it over. The back was blank. She's going to ask how you knew, Theo said. Tell her it was the scar and the lighthouse, and that I still have the painting she did of the Cape Breton view, the 4th one, because she tried to give it away and I wouldn't let her. Something moved across Theo's face. A recognition that came from somewhere deep, from a story he'd been told without knowing what it meant. She talks about that painting, he said quietly. She says it's the one she'd most want back. I know. Theo folded the business card and tucked it into the front pocket of his grocery bag, under the safety pins and the thin jacket and 12 years of careful survival. He stood up and looked at Marcus with an expression that was far too old for an 11-year-old face. I'll tell her, he said. He picked up the bag and walked to the door. At the threshold he stopped and turned back. Mr. Hale. His voice was careful. If you're her husband, does that make you my? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I don't know yet, Marcus said, but I'd very much like to find out. Theo stood there another moment, silhouetted against the gray November rain, and then he walked out into it. Marcus sat in the cafe for a long time after. He did not move. He looked at the table where the hot chocolate had left a ring, and at the window where the rain was already beginning to thin, and at his own hands which were not entirely steady. His phone buzzed. His accountant, apologizing for being late. asking if they could reschedule. Marcus typed back 2 words, "Of course," and put the phone face down and sat for a while longer, in the particular silence of something that has been broken for so long you've stopped noticing the edges. And that has just, without warning, begun to show you the possibility of being whole. She called on a Sunday. He'd spent the week moving carefully through his ordinary life, meetings, emails, a site visit in Hamilton, and not allowing himself to think too much about a phone that wasn't ringing. He'd learned, in the way grief teaches you, that hope held too tightly becomes its own kind of damage. When his cell rang at 8:14 on Sunday morning with a number he didn't recognize, he knew before he picked up. Marcus. Her voice was different and exactly the same. 12 years will change the surface of a voice, slow it down, roughen the edges slightly, but the quality underneath, the particular way she shaped a word, that was unchanged. That was her. He couldn't speak for a moment. "Theo told me," she said. "He told me everything you said." A pause. "I'm not sure I believe it yet, that it's you, that this is real." "I know," he managed. "I'm also not sure I deserve." She stopped. "I made choices that I had reasons for. I know that doesn't make them the right choices, Nora." His voice came out almost too steady. "I just want to understand. I've wanted to understand for 12 years. That's all." A long silence. He could hear her breathing. He could hear, faintly in the background, what might have been a television or music. A Sunday morning sound. "The man," she said finally. "The one Theo told you about. His name was Gerald Fitch. He worked for a firm that your company had a contract with about a year before I disappeared. He became obsessed is the only word. When I tried to make it clear that I was married, that I wasn't interested, he escalated. He followed me. He had photographs, Marcus, of our home, of my schedule, of..." She paused. "Of you. He told me that if I said anything to you, he would make sure you got hurt. He said he knew people. He was very specific and very calm, and that was the most frightening part." Marcus closed his eyes. "I was pregnant," she said quietly. "I found out 3 days before the accident. I hadn't told you yet. I was waiting for the right moment, because that's the kind of thing you want to say in the right moment." Her voice dipped and steadied. "And then Fitch told me he had something planned, that he was done waiting, and I panicked. I ran. The car, I drove it into the ravine deliberately. I wasn't in it. I wanted him to think it was over. I wanted him to stop watching me, and by extension stop watching you." Marcus pressed his hand over his eyes. He couldn't speak. "I was going to come back," she said. "I told myself I would come back once it was safe. Once I knew he'd moved on, or been arrested, or... But then Theo was born, and I was alone and sick by then, which I didn't understand for a long time, and the world was very large and we were very small in it, and I convinced myself that too much time had passed, that you'd built a life, that walking back into yours would only break what you'd managed to put together." "I didn't put anything together," Marcus said. The words came out rough. "Nora, I didn't do anything except wait." Silence. "I'm sorry," she said. And then again, differently, like she was saying it for a list of specific things. "I'm so sorry. Is Gerald Fitch still? He died 4 years ago. Heart attack. I read in an old news search one night when Theo was asleep." A pause. "That was when I started painting the lighthouse again." Marcus exhaled. He looked out his kitchen window at the pale winter light coming off the street and thought about a woman starting to paint again 4 years ago as a way of letting herself breathe, and the boy who'd watched her do it with 4 hours of careful, resting effort. "I want to meet you," he said. "Properly. You and Theo both. I want to. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to sit in the same room." Another silence. Longer this time. "He likes you," she said finally, and something in her voice had shifted, softer, carefully wondering. "He came home and he said, 'Mom, I think I met someone important.' He doesn't say things like that. He's remarkable." "I know." Her voice went quiet with the particular pride of someone who has done something hard and well. "He really is." They were silent together for a moment, and it was not the silence of estrangement. It was something older and stranger than that. The silence of 2 people finding, against every reasonable expectation, that a thread they thought had been cut was still there. Frayed, changed, but continuous. "Sunday afternoon," she said. "There's a place on Roncesvalles we like, the Blue Heron. They have good soup." "I know the Blue Heron," Marcus said. "I've walked past it 100 times. 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock." He arrived 12 minutes early and sat at a table by the window and ordered a tea he didn't drink. At 2 o'clock exactly the door opened, and Theo came in first, dressed in a different jacket, navy blue, zip intact, and scanning the room with those watchful gray-green eyes until he found Marcus and raised one hand in a small wave. And then Nora walked in behind him. She was thinner. Her hair was shorter, silver at the temples in a way it hadn't been. She was wearing a blue scarf with white on it, and it took Marcus a moment to realize. The pattern on the scarf was lighthouses, small repeating lighthouses printed on soft wool, and that she'd probably chosen it without thinking about it, the way we carry our anchors without noticing their weight. She saw him and stopped walking. He stood up from the table, and for a moment neither of them moved, and the cafe went about its business around them, ordinary and indifferent to the extraordinary particular weight of the moment between them. "Hi, Marcus," she said. "Hi, Nora." Theo looked back and forth between them with an expression that was still working out how to feel, that was complicated by love for both of them and uncertainty about what came next. And Marcus looked at this boy who had walked into a cafe in a thin gray jacket on a rainy Thursday and changed everything. This boy with his lighthouse patch and his careful eyes and his mother's scar story, and felt something that had been braced for 12 years slowly, carefully, begin to release. "Sit down," Marcus said. "I'll order you something hot." Theo pulled out a chair with the air of someone who was going to need a little time before he could stop assessing. "Hot chocolate?" "Whatever you want," Marcus said, and meant it in every possible direction.